Everybody, it's Amanda with Faith Grows Deep. So I already kind of went through and did a study of Ruth chapter 2. So I'm kind of getting into that. I know I just did a post before with Ruth 1 verses 1 through 5. And then I did a video of my process, which is chaotic to say the least. So in this one, I already kind of went through and kind of looked into some more information that I would have normally done in my process, but it kind of eliminates some of that chaos, I guess, and my back and forth as I go through the studies. So we're going to get into Ruth 2, and we are going to kind of break that apart with the Bible verses, and I already have notes and pieces that I've already looked up, so I have those ready to go. So this is kind of the summarized, condensed version instead of all the pieces going everywhere. All right, so anyway, with Ruth 2, I'll just go ahead and read through that. We have, this section is Ruth meeting Boaz. There was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor." I'm gonna pause. So we had gone through the meanings of names before. And since Boaz is a new one coming up, I did look that up. So Boaz has the meaning of swift, or the bearer of the covenant. And then if any of you guys work on a farm or something, you probably know this, but just to kind of verify information or to find a better meaning of things, glean, to glean the heads of grain. To gleaning is like to pick up and gather. So just so you kind of know. So in that time, they would go behind the harvesters and get the extra that fell on the ground or fell off of the sheaves. We'll get to that too. That's a little further. It's the sheaves, which is just their bundles of grain that they had. So anyway, we'll continue into the verses here. So she did say, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor." So favor also wasn't like, "Hey, let me do favor, let me have a favor," or something, you know. But the favor in the Hebrew is meaning kindness and graciousness. And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So Naomi's responding. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. The reapers are the harvesters. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless you." That actually has a good meaning of things, because that greeting back and forth to each other is kind of showing and exemplifying like the respect and kindness that he has towards those who work with him, but also that they have towards him, being their boss, basically. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" So he's noticing Ruth in the field. So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, "It is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not?" Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. So he's kind of just explaining, just stay in my field and do your work. Because he's explaining like nobody's going to cause her harm, basically. So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? And Boaz answered and said to her, It has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. So he's explaining his answer that he is doing this and showing that kindness and favor, especially because of what he heard that she did, and like leaving her parents, leaving her land and what she has known. And it's such a huge commendable thing, and her faithfulness and loyalty with Naomi despite everything that has happened, and how he has heard of this. And so he's explaining that's why he's finding that favor in her, giving her that kindness and that graciousness. Also, like, he's kind of blessing her in the aspect of saying, you know, the Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel, which is not the gods that they served in Moab, under whose wings you have come for refuge. So he's acknowledging how she took refuge in God, which in the Hebrew, refuge is to find that protection, to confide in, to put our trust in, to find that hope. So she left what she knew and found that in the God of Israel. So that's what he's kind of commending and acknowledging here. Then she said, Let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, Come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. And when she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. So I'm going to pause there. So now he is letting his workers know to allow her not just the grain that falls, which is normally what they like as they're collecting their sheaves. Anything that would fall off to the ground, they would leave for the poor and for the foreigners to gather up. That's an old thing that God had commanded the people before. But we're not going to get into that. But the fact that he goes in and tells them to also let her collect from the sheaves and the bundles they're already collecting, not just the ones that are falling to the ground. Okay, so continuing on, he explained not to reproach her, which is like to shame her for it, or like insult her, basically. So also let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So he's also telling them not to criticize her or to show strong disapproval towards her, and he's instructing them to purposely throw extra out for her to be able to glean. So this is showing a lot of Boaz's character, of his kindness and him giving to and caring for that community around him, whether they're foreigners or not. So she gleaned in the field until evening and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Might be pronouncing that wrong. However, the equivalent of an ephah or an ephah it looked like it was about 30 to 35 liters, which could be kind of about 8 gallons for us. And it looks like, from what I was looking into, it was equivalent to about 10 days worth of food. So that's how much she had collected that evening. Then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. So she never mentioned anything about Boaz being part of the family, so Ruth did not know who this was. And after they ate, hence the being satisfied, then Naomi shared with her. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today? And where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead." So she's bringing up how he is also remembering the dead, like her husband, being from that family line, and how he is blessing that, I guess, or following in that. And Naomi said to her, "This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives." So in another version, it also says that he is a redeemer, or the next of kin. So that's kind of what that is referring to. I'm going to dive into those after I finish these verses here. And I have a couple tabs kind of explaining the Kingsman Redeemer situation. And there's also some things about the marriage aspect that I will kind of go into, but it's kind of a separate thing to a point, but something to kind of keep in mind. So we'll continue these first. So she explained he is one of her close relatives. Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also said to me, 'You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.' And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, 'It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field.'" To meet you, that is a reference to like people being violent towards her, like to meet you in another field. I don't know how the wording goes with that, but the other translations kind of have the wording a little different, but it's talking about the same thing. So like that reference to not meet somebody in another field is like that protection to not be attacked, or people being violent towards her. So not going to another field where that could happen, but actually staying where she is what that's kind of referencing to. So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. So that's the end of the chapter there. But as I said, we'll kind of get into the Redeemer aspect and the Mosaic law, which is of Moses before all this. I do have some references for that, but it gets miscommunicated, so I kind of looked into some things to find a little more of that meaning here. So let me move that. Okay, so going into a kinsman redeemer, it talks about, like, the kinsman redeemer is a male relative that, according to the laws that you will find in the first 5 books of the Bible, they had a privilege or a responsibility to act on behalf of a relative who was in trouble or in danger or in need, or if they passed, for them to carry on that legacy kind of thing. This goes on to explain the Hebrew term goel. I might be saying that wrong. For the kinsman redeemer designates one who delivers or rescues somebody, or they redeem property or a person related to that family. So the kinsman who redeems or vindicates a relative is illustrated pretty clearly in the book of Ruth. It's showing what that example is, and we'll see more of that as we continue. But in this case, we're seeing how the kinsman redeemer is going to be Boaz. We haven't quite gone to those yet, but if you are curious about looking up some of these things, I guess I should have done this beforehand. So let me grab one of my already tabbed Bibles here. So I know it talks about a few different things with, I haven't really gotten a whole lot into it, but there was some stuff that talks about the families that they're supposed to carry on, like if a brother died, like Ruth was married to one of the sons. That's what Naomi was talking about, not being able to have another son to wait, for them to wait around to get remarried, to carry on that legacy of the son who passed away. So there's stuff about that in the first 5 books, or the Torah, or Pentateuch. I don't know how to pronounce that. But so it goes through different parts, and I didn't look up specifics. So you can look at gotquestions.org. Sometimes that has some pretty good answers. But they do kind of reference some different verses through Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, kind of going through what that kinsman redeemer thing is there. But just the summary of what that is, that's what that's for, that kinsman redeemer, that they're in the family, they're the next line to carry on that name, basically. So anyway, we do see some of that, and as we go through, I will probably end up touching back base on this, because it's not just what we're about to see unfold in Ruth, but it is how we see Christ in this as well. So we will do that when we do our full summary of Ruth, which looks like it will be, I think 3 or 4 videos from now. So we just got this one. We have 3, and then we got 1 of 4, 2. So I got 3 more videos, so it'll be the 4th one that we do will be the summary of the book. So I just kind of wanted to explain like what that kinsman redeemer thing was. It is stuff that was set for them in the Torah. Aside from that, we kind of go in, because also looking at that in Deuteronomy, there is a verse or verses that talk about, it's actually 23, 3 through 6, and it talks about no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord. It doesn't actually specify not marrying them. There is other verses that go in talking about the Israelites not marrying some of the other clans or tribes of the area, like Canaanites and stuff like that. And it specify, actually I wrote this in notes somewhere. Did I cover up my book? I got like 8 books over here, bear with me. Okay. So it looks like I'm going to go ahead and pull that up because I want to make sure I'm specific on that one. On what it's saying. Just to kind of show you guys here. Okay, so it is Deuteronomy 7. It's in verse 3, but I would encourage you to read the verses around that for more context. So it's talking, just to summarize it, it's talking about how the Lord is going to bring the Israelites into these different lands to clear out the people ahead of it. It explains different people like the Hittites and Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, things of that sort. So it goes through that, but then it is giving a warning per se, and says you must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. So it is even written why he gives that warning for them not to marry into those groups of people that they are about to take over the land from, basically. And specifies it's because they will lead the Israelites who are to follow the one God, that they would lead them away from worshiping the one God and would end up leading them to worship the multiple gods that they do. So there is stuff there, and there's been a little back and forth if that is even something that applies here when it gets into Boaz and Ruth. And it doesn't actually specify the Moabites there. It just says that the Moabite or Ammonites, like their descendants, can't enter the assembly of the Lord. But we'll probably break more into that later, because there's some back and forth specifications that it was talking more about the men more than it was the women, because the women marry and then they fall elsewhere. But there's more here than just a foreigner, a Moabitess marrying into an Israelite, getting married to an Israelite. But I think the big difference, and it gives other examples of Samuel as well. But as we see at this point, Ruth gave up all of that from what she grew up around, all of her family, them worshiping multiple gods. She gave up all of that to be with Naomi, that her people would be like, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. So not Naomi, Ruth gave up all that to take on this whole new life and whole new way of living, that she is now saying the Israelites are now her people, not the Moabites. Her God, Naomi's God, the God of Israel, is now her God, not the multiple gods that she grew up around. So Ruth is already doing this shift. And as we kind of unpack further into this, we're going to see how God takes that and blesses that, but how we can see a parallel to what Jesus represents in this. But again, that'll be at the summary. So we're halfway through the book of Ruth now. But I just kind of wanted to touch a little bit on that in case there was any curiosity or questions. And if you do have any questions and would like me to go any further, please leave a comment so I can break into that. Yeah, I think that's about it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this segment of the book. I apologize if I don't explain things the best, but I'm still learning along with all of you, so this isn't me like, oh, I have all this training, I know what all this is. Like, I do quite a bit of research kind of going into some of this when I have questions that pop up. So if there's any questions you have and maybe you don't know how to find the answer, or you're curious about another perspective coming in, I'd be happy to look into some of that and try to share those answers. Anyway, I hope you guys have a blessed day. It got real quiet. All right, have a good day, you guys.